So we're in my hotel, which is clean. The parts you can see of it, at least. I'm not going to tell you what's over there a little bit more. I'm not going to do that.
Sparrow,
it looks pretty good. And, of course, the great thing about this Stanley Cup Finals versus all other Stanley Cup Finals, it sounds like a Passover thing. What is different from this Stanley Cup Final than all other Stanley Cup Finals? This Stanley Cup Final has the Women's World Cup of Soccer going on, which is on TV constantly, which is awesome. I mean, I guess that didn't really get the response I expected from the
I think the deadpan silence was a good.
I actually like soccer. I saw Russ's comment on Facebook today. So it's your typical cliche. I don't like soccer because I'm an American.
That's not why I don't like soccer. Wait a minute. It's not because I'm an American. It's because it's just not fun to watch.
It's not because I'm American. It's because it's just
like
dumb.
I said, I saw Russ's "I'm an American, I don't like soccer" comments. So.
I'm an American, and I like soccer when the World Cup comes around. And if you ask me if I would rather look at Alexi Lawless or Alex Morgan, I'd rather look at Alex Morgan. So I'm actually watching a little bit of the Women's World Cup. So there you go.
Oh, that's good. That's awesome.
I asked who Alex Morgan was. I said, "Who is he?"
Alex Morgan is
just to annoy somebody because I really don't know who she is, but I know it was a she. But
well, it's controversial actually because of the Hope Solo thing that's going on. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this World War.
Yeah, Morgan's not playing either. I mean, she's been injured, and they've put in another player, and that player actually had played. I'm probably not up to date as I should be on this, but.
There's a city in this one situation, but
yes, that's right. But there is some. I'm sure she would think. I saw a quote from her. She said that she felt she was ready to play, but obviously the coach said doesn't believe she's ready to play. So.
Right.
I will say this about Americans: they are not every one of them, but a lot of them are awful bandwagon soccer fans, and that was the reason I put up the post.
I saw, what this actually kind of surprised me is, as you know, everybody, the big thing now in the NHL is before games to play soccer. It used to only be European players, but now, a lot of players have joined in, and they're all quite good at it. But the Tampa Bay Lightning, I watched them do this probably 3 or 4 times now in the playoffs. And you know who their 2 best guys are at playing soccer before the game in terms of keeping the ball in the air and
Hedman's got to be one of them. Hedman?
No, Hedman doesn't even play that I've ever.
Really? Okay.
Ryan Callahan probably is one of them.
No, it is not.
Kucherov.
That's a good guess, though, Ryan Callahan.
Tyler Johnson.
Tyler Johnson is exactly
really
right. Tyler Johnson.
Why not? He's great at everything, but it took him forever to get to the NHL, so I figured it had to be him.
Yeah, he was good, and the other one is another surprise too.
Alex Killorn. Alex Killorn.
No.
Vasilevsky.
He does not have soccer in his DNA, but he's got another sport in his DNA.
Oh.
Stamkos.
No.
No. So it's a baseball player. I don't know.
He is the son of a famous athlete.
Oh. Okay. Now this is really bad.
Yeah, now I'm not getting it, and I should get it.
His father's in the Hall of Fame.
I bet you there's 1,000 people out listening to this who are like, what the
they're saying we're idiots because we're going brain dead. Go ahead, Kev. Take us out of our misery.
J.T. Brown was
J.T. Brown?
Was the other one, yeah.
J.T. Brown's father's...
Ted Brown, who's in the College Football Hall of Fame. Played for the Minnesota Vikings for, a lot of years as well. But
that's the amazing thing about J.T. Brown. Just 2 years ago, he was in the Flyers camp, in their rookie camp, and I spoke to him, and he was at least 4 or 5 rookie camps with no job, and now he's playing in the Stanley Cup.
It's surprising because he can skate, and he's aggressive. I asked him whether or not he played football. He actually played some tailback, which is not surprising considering his father was an NFL running back. But but I've watched the soccer games, and he is very good. And the other thing I'd like to bring up now, is it just me, or does Alex Killorn look like a Niedermeyer?
Yes. He looks just like a Niedermeyer. He's got that Niedermeyer look. Totally agree. That's funny.
He looks like he could be Niedermeyer's first cousin, or...
I didn't even think of that.
Well, he makes a kick save like another Ivy Leaguer and Ken Dryden, because that save that he made late in the third period last night with his right skate was pretty impressive.
Yeah. There's very obscure references and transitions there, Mike, in that last sentence. I don't even know where to start.
I couldn't think of any Harvard goaltender, so I had to go the Ivy League.
No, I mean, just to put the Ivy League thing together with Ken Dryden, and that's why you're a pro. I'm telling you.
And I didn't want to say Ben Scrivens because no.
Yeah, no. All right, well, let's start the show. Here we go. We are
Carter Hutton reference yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Just ask.
We did last night.
Chart.
Kevin threw a Carter. You're talking about the rumor chart. Kevin threw a Carter Hutton thing at me last night in the middle of the game, which was hilarious. So that's why you have a backup goalie, I said. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, June 9th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen from USA Today Sports, live from Chicago.
And I'm Eklund, live from Chicago, about 18 floors below Kevin, so hey. You're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock. Sometimes it's 1 o'clock on the West, in the West right now. So during the finals, we're coming in at different times as we try to get in everything that we're getting into. Spent the whole day with the rumor chart. And then, Kevin, of course, you spent a lot of time today with the Detroit Red Wings. What are your thoughts on the whole situation?
Well, I mean, it's a perfect fit. I mean, all you have to do is look at what John Cooper has done with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and you'll understand why the Red Wings hired Jeff Blashill. I mean, they're very similar personalities, similar in their style. You know, both of them would have been successes in whatever endeavor, you know, they embraced for a career path. You know, they're just those kind of guys. You know, they're going to be successful. And, you know, Blashill is a glib, and he's a good communicator, and he's a hard worker, and he's very modern in his approach, and he's a native Detroiter who his dream job is to coach the Red Wings. So, you know, this is good. And, you know, one of the probably underwritten stories about the Red Wings, like, they didn't want Mike Babcock to go away. They certainly tried to make an effort to keep him, but, you know, when it was clear that they were going to lose him, like, they didn't say, oh, woe is us, and, you know, we should, as Ken Holland said, what do you want me to do, fold up the franchise, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, so they were prepared for this. You know, they lost Scotty Bowman, who was the greatest coach in NHL history, when he retired, and, you know, they, after, you know, maybe the wrong decision in keeping Dave Lewis and moving him up to coach, they, you know, found Mike Babcock, and he ended up being, you know, a terrific coach, and I think they feel the same will be true of Jeff Blashill.
They bring Chris Chelios on too, which is a really you know, that's a fascinating move. Chelios, you know, this does not ingratiate him anymore to the Chicago audience.
No, well, what's interesting about that is, you know, he's been working with the young kids up in Grand Rapids, and he really has enjoyed the experience. You know, Chelios was actually born to coach. He actually likes that. He likes going to practice.
Plus, he's a former Grand Rapids player.
So, yeah, that's right. And you know, he really likes this, and he and Jeff have, you know, good chemistry. And I think, you know, when you don't play in the league, I think this is sort of ludicrous, but when you don't play in the league, it seems like you're more inclined to try to get a guy who's been an NHL player to be, you know, part of the mix.
Yeah, I think it's ludicrous too, but I can tell you that I had a long discussion with Ken Hitchcock one time who told me that it wasn't, and Ken Hitchcock's a coach who hasn't played, and he hasn't played, and he said it was a problem. He said it was a real issue for him all the time. He said he always dealt with it, and he would hear the little things that were said behind the scenes and like that. He would get, you know, he really felt like, you know, even though you could bring up the, you know, Scotty Bowman or any other of these number of great coaches who never played, it was still a problem.
Well, there seems to be a concerted effort here by Ken Holland to keep Tony Granato. I know that Granato opted out of the final year. There was a year option on his contract, but there are reports that they're negotiating a new deal. And, you know, I mean, Chelios is I know he's worked with the kids, as Kevin said, and, you know, but he's a first-time coach in that respect. Blashill's a first-time NHL coach, but he has the pedigree with the Calder Cup. But Granato is a former NHL head coach, has been an assistant coach in a couple different places, and it would make sense to have a veteran hand on that bench along with those guys. I'm just wondering what's going to happen with the rest of the staff. I mean, there were rumors at the end of last month regarding Jim Hiller and Andrew Brewer, who were a couple Babcock assistants who supposedly were on their way to Toronto, but there hasn't been any kind of announcement regarding either one.
I haven't heard anything about that. Have you ever heard anything about what's going on with them?
No, it's just been assumed they were going to go with him.
Yeah.
And Babcock would take Granato if he wanted to go. But I'm just not buying that. As I said in the previous podcast, Tony's brother coaches with the development program in Michigan. He's an American. I think he has a chance to have, in my opinion, more of an impact working with Jeff Blashill than Mike Babcock. Not that they didn't get along, they did, but I'm just saying, with Jeff Blashill, he might lean on him a little bit more than Babcock would. So if I'm looking at it logically and just guessing, I'm guessing he's going to stay in Detroit, and I think they'll pay him well.
Yeah, that would make sense. It really would.
It would.
It would make a ton of sense. But let's move on to last night's, I think, like one of the most improbable hockey games I've ever watched. Like I just could not understand. This game did not seem. I mean, the whole day was nuts. I mean, Bishop didn't look right in his skate, and yet I just didn't think he was going to play. And Kevin, we talked about this, and you thought he was. I thought he wasn't. Then he comes in and really looked horribly injured, like just to the point. I mean, I'm sure it looked bad on TV, but I'm telling you, it looked a lot worse live. I mean, it was one of those things that live you couldn't. It was like a car crash you couldn't look away from. Like, how is he going to get up? Is he going to be able to move his leg? Is he going to be able to cross? How is he going to do this? And yet, he stopped 38 shots of 39. The Chicago Blackhawks missed some unbelievably golden opportunities in the process.
Like a wide open net when Hossa got tripped.
Yeah, wide open net when Hossa gets tripped. But the whole process. And so at the end of the day, I mean, and at the end of the first period, when I met with Kevin, we were out in the very nice food that they provide for us here in Chicago in between meals, in between periods, and we were talking, and we were just saying, there's no way he's got. We were both, Kevin and I were like, there's no way he's going to play in the second period. It's impossible. He does not. I mean, how could they have possibly? This is Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals in Chicago. You can't possibly risk this guy. And yet, they kept him in. They kept playing, and somehow Tampa ends up with that win last night. And they really only had one opportunity in the third period to score, and they score.
It could be a sales job too on his television interview, saying, "Well, Bishop's 6'7", so it takes him much longer to get up." And it's like, all right, John, I'm all very amused with you. I like the guy. We all like the guy, but stop. Just stop, because he wasn't
a goalie who knows what it's like to feel like you're in absolute agony when you're playing goal because I'm just not in shape. I can tell you flat out, I know what it looks like to get up when you're in pain.
What they should have done, if I were at NBC, I would have had a timer on Crawford and on Bishop on how long it took him to get up, and then you would see the difference.
And the Hossa empty net that he missed was another example of Bishop overcompensating for it. He was obviously going to not let himself be beat to that side, so he was way over that side, and then it leaves all open net. And yet, here they are up 2-1. I cannot believe. I felt like Chicago really blew an opportunity last night, the kind of opportunity that you don't always bounce back from in these Stanley Cups. What are your thoughts, Kev?
Well, they're the Blackhawks, so you would expect that they'll bounce back from it. They have a history of doing that, but. It's been a bizarre series. I thought one of the best quotes that we've heard came after Game 2, where Cooper said, we could be up 2-0, we could be down 2-0, so maybe it's fair that we're 1-1. And
yeah, that's about right.
That's about right. And it's a 2-1 series. The Lightning have one more goal than the Blackhawks. The shots are relatively even. I think Bishop's been a little better than Crawford, but neither one of them have been Carey Price. This is not a goaltender series. They just want their goalie not to lose it for them. I think it's come down to the fact that they have both Kane and Taves not scoring, and the Lightning only have Stamkos not scoring.
Right.
And their role players have, kind of found some goals. So it's really been an evenly played series. It's a punch counter punch series.
First, let's just say this. Oh, go, Russ. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm fascinated with the side stories. First the diarrhea story. I was all over that. I was because I'd heard that before, and then Roberto Luongo really echoed that on Twitter. Like he said, yeah, it's happened to me, and so there was that story, and then there's okay, well maybe it's not that, maybe it's just his ankle or his knee. So you had that. Then there's Oduya going out with a hand injury and then coming back playing one-handed. Like. Chicago is running out of defensemen. I mean, they just are. At this point, Timo Timonen pretty much has to play. Even if you don't think he can play, he's going to have to play at some point. Like, it's just Chicago's running on 3 good defensemen. I mean, really, it's this Stanley Cup is a war of attrition right now, more than any other one I've ever seen.
Yeah, this period is sponsored by KO Pectate. Let me just say this.
Way stronger stuff than that, I think, because I mean, whatever they're shooting into Bishop to get him to play, it's like.
I don't think that Ben Bishop. You're going to mistake Ben Bishop for Willis Reed in Game 7 of the NBA Final here. I don't know. We don't know what the injury is, so we really can't judge until after the series how brave he's being. All I know is that it was painful to watch him. His lateral movement, his moving post to post was not good. I'm surprised he wasn't more of a liability for them. But the funny thing is that I thought the Lightning dominated the first period. The Hawks got that goal late and sort of deflated things. When they went up 2-1, I thought the game was over with. And then the triplets come back. It was 13 seconds to tie up the game. Yeah. I mean. The Hawks are missing a lot of.
First period, Mike. I mean, the Hawks dominated the first period. I mean, there was.
See, I know the shots on.
18-5 for Chicago.
I know the shots on goal were 19-7 or something like that. But
it couldn't get out of the end. They couldn't get out of their end.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that. I didn't think it was that one-sided. But anyway,
what happened was Tampa stopped playing because Tampa was afraid of letting them close the Bishop. So they completely backed in and just let them have the blue line, let them have the red line, and then that's what it looked like to me. And then, but whatever Cooper said to them in between the first and second period was magic because they came out in the second period.
Well,
they were no longer afraid.
According to reports, Steve Yzerman went down to the locker room in between the first and the second period. So maybe
something happened.
I'll tell you what happened. The same thing that's happened in this series all the way through. It was the Lightning's turn in the second period. This is just the way this series has gone. Where one period, one team dominates, and the next period, the next team dominates, and it's like, okay, our turn, your turn, our turn, your turn, and who scores last wins. And by the way, I did work Willis Reed, Bobby Bond, and Kurt Gibson all into my list about Ben Bishop.
Nice.
Okay. So.
Nice. Yep. I thought Kirk Gibson. It was very Kirk. It really was. I mean, at some point, I stopped asking, why are they doing this, and started just thinking, this is just incredible that he's doing it. It went from that to why to this is incredible. But at the same time, Vasilevsky, who I brought up somebody else. Is it possible Vasilevsky's hurt? That's the other thought. That it was that crazy that went through my head. That is it possible Vasilevsky? That's how crazy it was, though. And I know he's not because he came in and played, and that was fine. But it feels like there's something else going on there.
I think if something else is that Cooper's taking advantage of the fact that the team knows that their goalie is this hurt, and they have to really rally behind him, and they did. And he's getting them to play better than we thought they would play based on the fact that they're trying to help a fallen team.
He nailed it. I think he nailed it. And that's from the second period on, that's what it was like last night. That's what it felt like.
And yesterday, in previewing Game 3, I said that I thought that the Lightning needed Stamkos to step up and do something. Now he didn't do it, but you had Callahan with that great shot on the first goal and assisting on the game winner, and I thought he had probably his best game of the playoffs. And getting a goal from a guy like Paquette. I mean, if they're getting secondary scoring from their third and fourth lines. Really, the Blackhawks, I don't think they got much from their depth forwards at all yesterday. So I mean that's a distinct advantage. And if they can get Stamkos online, then it's going to really be a tough road to hoe for the Hawks. I just can't imagine Kane and Taves being this much of a non-factor through 3 games.
You know, it's not like they're not playing well. I mean, they are. That's the other thing. In my opinion, I think they're still playing pretty well. Maybe I'm wrong.
Planning, it's the video work. We got to give Hedman credit. You got to give Coburn credit. Coburn's really stepped up here. Again, I always told Flyers fans they were being way too critical of this guy, and now that he's in a secondary role, you can see how valuable he could be.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with Coburn has always been he outthinks himself, and when he just plays, he's great. He's a good hockey player, but he does overanalyze things. But I mean, where do we go from here, Kevin? What are your thoughts? Do you think this can be a 5-game?
No, I don't. You know, like even if the Blackhawks lost Game 4, they'd probably win Game 5. They're, and I've sort of resigned myself that I want to stop using the word resilient just because I think it's overused. But you know, it is the best word to describe the Blackhawks. They seem to play best when they should be out of it, and I think that just comes from the experience they have, from the style of players they have, and I'm actually starting to buy into John Cooper's speeches about how we're always measuring players now by their points as opposed to how well they're playing. I mean, Jonathan Taves' face-offs are still outstanding. When you're watching him, live, you can just see the effort he's putting in out there. And the same thing with Stamkos. I mean, Stamkos, I didn't notice him so much yesterday, but when he wasn't scoring early in this series, he was still very visible. He was playing much more physical and playing a strong overall game. And the problem is that we think if you're going to pay a guy a lot of money, he's got to put points on the board. But in the Lightning's case, he didn't really need to put points on the board because Johnson's line was going so well. So.
Yeah, I'm still worried about Chicago, though. I am. I mean, I don't know if their defense can really go much further. I mean, again, you're going to ask Oduya to play with one hand next game, so that's your number 4. Your number 5 is going to be like Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and then your number 6 is either Rundblad or Kimmo Timonen. I mean, that's kind of rough. You might be able to get through the third period if it's a close game with that, but early on, I could see Cooper really game planning to try and expose their defense a little bit. You don't get the last change, but you know what? They don't even have 2 strong pairings anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think you could see a concerted effort in Game 3 of them trying to throw the body at Seabrook and Keith and Yarmulson and work them. I mean, they're hoping.
Finally, they did.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I picked Tampa in 7 games. I don't think that the Hawks are out of it by the slightest. I mean, I think this is a team with a lot of character, with a lot of firepower. They're going to come back. Even if they lose Game 4, they could come back and make this a 7-game series. I'm just wondering, like that comment that former Hawk Brent Sobel made before this series, like when it was Anaheim and Chicago, the playing of Keith and Seabrook 30-plus minutes wasn't going to affect them in the conference final. It was going to hit them in the Stanley Cup final. And if you go to Game 6 and Game 7 with Oduya not being able to play 25 minutes and you have to pile more ice time onto Keith and Seabrook, you're asking too much. It's just too much.
Maybe with Seabrook, but I think Keith can play the entire game.
And Yarmulson can play more minutes, but again, you're really leaning on these guys. I mean, if Chicago's not going to play with the lead in games, they're going to have trouble. Now, I think to me that's their strategy: is they've got to get the lead and keep the lead.
Right.
You're dead. And that's what they tried to do last night. I mean, that first goal was a good shot by Callahan, but it wasn't a really great shot. I didn't think it was a great shot. I thought it was a bad goal, honestly. Because it's upper corner, but it's upper corner dead center of the net. Like it's not an upper corner dead center of the net. It tells you your goalie went down way too soon. Like that should not have happened in my mind. It was a great pass by Hedman. I mean that to get it to Callahan, that was a laser beam of a pass. I mean, it was. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a pass that fast and that accurate from that far in the NHL. It was like it was shot out of a passing machine. Like
Russ. He's done that 2 or 3 times in the playoffs with that long bomb pass.
Yeah, we're all focused in on the points, like with Tyler Johnson and Harrison and everything, and Hedman's their best player. I would make him the Conn Smythe if they won regardless of points, because to me, without Victor Hedman, they would never be able to win the Cup. I don't know if they'll win the Cup anyhow, but if they win, he's going to end up being the reason.
I would say he's the favorite for the Lightning for the Conn Smythe.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's close. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I mean, Tyler Johnson would get some consideration, but I think it's sort of like a college exam where the essay questions are weighted more. Like what you do in the big games and the Stanley Cup Final is weighted more. And Johnson's still dangerous, but he's not Hedman. I mean, Hedman, as you said, is ruling. And we're using words like monster and force and beast. Whenever you start throwing those words around,
when they drafted him, that's what they expected, right?
That's what they expected, but yeah, still. I mean, do you think the Swedish Olympic team's going to maybe add him for the World Cup of Hockey now? Do you think he might have earned his spot?
Yeah, I would say that pairing will remain together.
I think the Swedes have the best defensive core in the world. Better than Canada's.
Well, better than the U.S.'s?
Better than the U.S.
U.S. have the best defensive core.
That's a tall order. I don't know about that one.
Okay.
It's a good debate.
Yeah, we'll save that for the summer.
I might go with you on that. I'd have to think about it a little bit. I mean, I'd have to think about it. You have to size it up a little.
A top three of Ekman, Larson, Hedman, and Carlson is pretty tough to beat.
No doubt. It's the difference of styles too, though. I mean, those guys are going to be a little flashier, a little more offensive, and the American guys are going to be a little tougher. While they can still score, they're going to play a little different game too. So
yeah, but Stallman and Hedman are great shutdown guys. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, it's a good debate. We'll definitely go down that road. That's a good.
The problem with the Americans is, maybe Seth Jones will be that guy, but at this moment, they don't have the dominant offensive star that the Sweden has, or even Canada has.
Dustin Byfuglien could be, but
no, he's not even in. He's not even in their neighborhood.
Yeah, true.
I think Jones is approaching that. I saw a really good thing out of him this year.
I did too, but I watched him in the World Championships, and I mean, I saw that in him, but he's just not far enough down the road yet to be there. But I don't disagree with you. I think he
was amazingly impressive in the Predators Blackhawks series.
He was.
Yeah.
Seth Jones was really. I mean, he was every bit what you asked for him to be in that series. Especially when Shea Weber went down, he was phenomenal. But yeah, I mean that I do believe that I put Sweden and U.S. at the top, and Canada slightly below. We'll see. Let's talk about the draft combine a little bit. I spent an hour and a half, I think, with all the draft people who were here last night as we sat on a bus trying to get back from the traffic from the United Center. I was with McDavid and Eichel and the rest, and Hannafin and all the rest of them. They're a funny group, in that period of time, because we were moving like inches at a time, and they still managed to. It's the cool thing about hockey players. Even these like guys are going to be really famous. They were all really polite about the whole thing. It was very funny. I thought they didn't. But yeah, you were at the combine. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts were first, like the Harbor Center was a great place. It was good that they had everything in one place too. That was nice for the players. It was nice for the GMs. It was nice for the media. They had about 176 media, and I remember my XM partner Shane Malloy telling me like the first one he went to there was probably like 5 to 10 guys, and so it's quite a difference. It's no longer in a ballroom. It's in a state-of-the-art place. The expectation is that possibly next year there'll be on-ice stuff. I'm still a little fuzzy about that because I want to see what's going to happen with insurance and things like that with on-ice, but
yeah,
it could happen. And then, there's even talk down the road of making it available to the public, but not like for a $20 charge like the NFL. Nothing stupid like that.
So Jack Eichel goes in and just absolutely tears it up.
But you would expect that because, again, college players, they play less, they work out more, they have full-time trainers on their staff. They're always going to have that physical power more than an OHL player. The OHL just literally allowed guys last summer to hire a trainer for like, $400 or $500. Otherwise, that wasn't even in the rules. Like, it wasn't even allowed. And so, like, you had to do that out of your own pocket. And, of course, a guy like McDavid can and everything, but not every player can. But yet every player who plays in NCAA hockey has a full staff at their disposal. So I think I was expecting Eichel to be great in all of those categories, and it doesn't mean he's a better hockey player. I spoke to, a lot of scouts and other people, and it is just a part of this equation. I don't even know what percentage it would be, and he didn't put a percentage on it, but it is just a part of it. But the more data you get and the bigger sample size, the better an idea you have of some of these guys. But like, as an example, Mackenzie Blackwood, a goalie, he jumped off the long jump. Like, nobody's ever done that before. So it just shows you how, with core strength, what some of these guys can do. And look, imagine goalies doing this years ago. I mean, you might have found a Richter who could do it or somebody, but I mean, now, you looked at him and he was like a bodybuilder. And so it's unbelievable. Some of the
crazy for a goalie. I mean, was there anybody that really helped themselves a ton in this combine?
I think Blackwood probably did help himself because there was thoughts that maybe Samsonov was the #1 goalie, and I think now if you look at that, maybe that does change a mind because of the rigors of the position. Eichel didn't matter what he did. McDavid didn't matter what he did. I think Pavel Zacha did well enough now that I think he's starting to get more respect from at least the media. I'm pretty sure the scouts knew what he was anyhow, but he came in looking bigger than I thought. Kyle Connor, the USHL center, he came in looking a lot more fit than I thought he would be as far as already having some muscle on him. Some guys practice for 3 months for this, and some guys could only practice for like 3 weeks. So the ones that could practice for 3 months for it really, I think, did help themselves. It's more of the second, third round guys that could really help themselves.
Was anybody hurting themselves at all? Any damaging things happen?
No, nobody hurt themselves. It's one of those things where I think when you're doing the testing, if you feel like it's not going right, you could just sort of slow it down for it. Nobody ever looks at the bad test results. They only made the top 10 available. So I think that's a key thing. But a guy like Travis Konecny, he was up there in all the strength categories. And, one of the things in my scouting report for him is he's great at sort of fighting through traffic and getting to the net.
Right.
And maybe it is that strength that does it. Maybe in a couple of years, we're going to figure that out. But they had this thing called the force plate testing where you jump down on a plate, basically, on a square, and it's all videoed and everything's hot. And they got that from the NFL, so that's something where they're doing a little more with that. They did this stride testing, this wide testing that, to be honest, it looked like a bad game of Twister at times, but it might come out with some good results. We don't know what's going to do down the road, but players were very challenged by it. It seems like they were some were really sort of surprised by it. But there's one thing about hockey players. You can literally tell them to do anything.
No, that's exactly right.
They'll do it. They will try it out, and they'll give it a go, and that's...
We'll now play Jenga.
Yeah.
Here.
I just appreciate that. It's just the fact that they're always up for a challenge. Good or bad, they don't care.
Competitive, as long as it's competitive.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys were competitive. I think, the fact that they have them in groups definitely kept them competitive for certain guys, for lifting, for pull-ups, for things like that. But we learned pull-ups don't really show you anything. Maybe there's one thing that it tells a scout that he needs to know. The bench pressing, I don't know. But the thing that, is always interesting.
For me, because I was such a bad goalie that I would use the crossbar to pull myself up. But besides that was it. Yeah.
It's fun to learn how many teams spoke to a guy, and one of the biggest numbers was like 24 or 25. I mean, it's amazing you can go through that many interviews. But then, there were some teams that did a lot of interviews in season, so they could just focus on certain guys there. But it still doesn't mean they're not interested in them. It just means they needed to find out more about these guys. And like an example, if you were Edmonton and you spoke to Connor McDavid, how long was the interview really going to be with Connor McDavid anyhow? 10 minutes? But Zacha said his first interview was with Edmonton, and there was a time change, and he said he was a little sleepy. And he said, look, at the end of the day, I was sort of fighting it because I knew they weren't picking me. They're picking McDavid. But they're doing due diligence, right, in case they ever get the player down the road.
Right, and also they as Mike said yesterday, they ask about other players to players. That was another thing that was kind of funny. Like,
yeah, actually, an article's up on CSN Philly right now because the Flyers were asking Terrell Goldborn about Nick Merkley because they both played on Kelowna and they both would play together. So yeah, and he said they asked him specifically about him during the season. So that was a key thing. So yeah, I went in there looking for those sort of connections because to me that's more valuable than an interview.
Hotel room. I can imagine like the newspapers up in the hotel room and the strings attaching to each one with pins, different things like that. That's me at the trade deadline. So
but players are tremendously coached now for these things, so you don't get that many crazy results.
And then there is this thing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And Governor Mike, jump in. That there are players who are just not good practice players. They're just not good physical. But you throw them on the ice in a game of hockey, and they're great.
Yeah, there's no doubt there's game speed, and then that's a thing. And so I would tend to agree with you on that. The other thing to sort of keep in mind too is there's always rumors that go around at drafts, before drafts. And definitely we're starting up about some players at the Combine, like, oh, he didn't interview well, and this. You know what? The only thing that really seemed to come out of an interview was Murray saying how Eichel said he was the best player. And you know what? At the end of the day, Murray shouldn't have said that. He shouldn't have let that out to the media because you knew it was misconstrued. That's really not what he meant. But it's just like me asking, if you're going to ask me, are you the best prospect guy, am I going to say no? I'm going to say yeah. And so that was sort of silly. But like,
there was about this. And you're dead on. And Kevin, maybe you can tell me this. And Russ too, the same kind of thing. Eichel might be the best player besides Connor McDavid in the last how many years, right? I mean, honestly, is there a better player than Eichel that's come out of the draft in years?
Well, I mean, Crosby, obviously, Ovechkin.
Yeah, Crosby, but that's a long time.
Tavares, there's a few. That's it.
Yeah.
Tavares, Tavares and Eichel. Tavares would have gotten drafted ahead of him. You think?
Yes.
I think it would have been. I think he would have. Yeah.
I think Stamkos.
I'm less sure of that.
I think Stamkos would have.
I'm not sure of that one.
I'm not sure of that one, actually.
Yeah. But I remember Hedman was. I mean, there were Tavares. Remember, Tavares was not. There was a lot of craziness that was going on around Tavares. Like Hedman, people were saying, "Oh, maybe they're going to go."
Craziness. It was like, well, he's a little slow. He's
right. Exactly.
Right. But it was still. I mean, Eichel. There's nothing wrong with the guy. I mean, so if
that's the thing. Eichel's big. He's strong, and he skates. I mean, Russ can tell you, he's a dominant skater.
Yes.
Like Hannafin said. Like you said, you got to be on the ice with him to appreciate his speed.
Yeah,
and that's
rush. He does.
And that's the thing right now. I mean, a lot with Tavares with his speed. A lot of agendas are being floated right now. Like these reports. And I'm not going to name the player, but there was a player who was speculated to be, a guy who would be drafted late in the first round. And one Western Conference general manager said, well, this guy interviewed great. And an Eastern Conference scout said this guy was basically a freak, and we were completely off of him. That Eastern Conference scout might actually be hoping that guy falls down to their pick. So what they're doing is they're trashing him so they can get him with that pick. So that I think there's a lot of agendas.
I interviewed that player, and I thought he was highly intelligent.
And I want to know why this player is such a big mystery. What's going on?
I don't want to bring his name up because I don't want to be the one that's sort of attaching stuff to him. That's the only.
Right.
All right.
But
That's fun. No, that's fair. I'm just kidding.
But another thing is, and this is unfortunately now we're in the BMI world, body mass index, and we sort of start looking at all these different things. And so I have been looking at Mitch Marner and his build, and he's got very narrow shoulders. And I remember some guys were sort of almost fighting me on it, and then when they realized he's there in the scrum, and they were like, yeah, he's 161 pounds, and how many more pounds can you put on him? Now, that doesn't mean he can't play in the NHL, because Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is not a big guy. He's a skinny guy, but he's still only putting up 56 points. So
exactly. I mean, there are people out there, probably every one of you watching, every person on this panel right now has legs on their dining room table that are bigger than Wayne Simmons' legs. Like, there's no question.
But higher than anybody.
Wayne Simmons has the smallest chicken, tiny little legs, and Wayne Simmons is a powerhouse. I mean, it's harder to get the puck away from. I think along the boards. I think Wayne Simmons is one of the top 10 players in the league along the boards.
He is, but he could jump high. His vertical would be great.
Right. Yeah. So.
Basketball.
But yeah, but that doesn't help much with skates.
No, but it helps you first. I mean, so there are things, but I'm just
no, there's no question. You're right. It's strength. Yeah, I agree.
For Mitch Marner to be a great NHL player, he is going to have that escapability and that elusiveness.
Right.
Otherwise, he's not going to score near what he's used to scoring. I mean, that's just something that when you're drafting a guy like that, you have to look at that.
I can just say this. The excitement in this draft starts at pick number 3 because it's going to be boring at 1 and 2 because we know what's going to happen. There's nothing, nobody's going to trade for, Edmonton's never going to trade the number 1 pick. Buffalo's never going to trade the number 2 pick. It's going to be McDavid. It's going to be Eichel. But everything starts with that number 3 pick with Arizona. I've heard scenarios about them trading down. I've heard scenarios about Toronto trading down. So, I mean, I think that's where everything is going to start happening is about, a half an hour into the draft.
Yeah, and again, I'm hearing stuff like, oh, Dylan Strome is slow. Well, it's like, you know what? These days, there's very few NHL players that you can improve on with their speed in off-season training. They all work on it. They all get faster. Tyler Toffoli was slow, too, and he had 23 goals this year. Like, to me, with Dylan Strome, I'm not even worried about that. I'm not. Now, even if it was in a number 3 position, I wouldn't worry about it. But this is the nitpicking now that will go on for the next couple weeks. We'll all try and find these little things. Well, what about this? And, it's just – and we got to remember, teams also look back into the family backgrounds too. So if somebody has a dad who played and they look at the mom and they want to see how tall they are to see if they're going to still grow, we don't think about these things. But when they're in an interview, they ask, how tall is your mom? How tall is your dad? How tall is your uncle? I mean –
It's gonna be a draft combine for the parents now. They're gonna test their wingspans.
Yeah. Might as well. But I mean, these are things now that have all really started to come into play more than it used to be, and you can learn some things. I mean, look, like Seth Jones, his dad was following him around at the draft. You don't need to look any further than his dad to realize he's pretty much going to look the same and maybe bigger.
Big man. Like there's no. Yeah, I mean, my theory on this whole thing has always been that general managers, and from talking to general managers, I just think that they really want to have something reassure them about what they're already thinking. And I think that this is what the combine does. If you're already thinking this, and suddenly, oh man, he tests out of the water, now because they don't trust themselves enough to just say, okay, I need something there. I mean, they'll say they're completely 100% confident, but at the end of the day, I think that they really need somebody to tell them that they're right. Okay, this is what you're right. You're right about this player. This is, Kevin, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think the combine is pretty much for just confirming what your scouts, said about the guy. I just think that you can't get enough information, so you go and you get a chance to talk to him, and if there's guys that are close, a good combine might put the guy over on the edge, but you're not going to change your opinion on someone your scouts say is outstanding just because.
Right.
I thought it was funny about Russ talking about Strome because I have never seen anybody talk about Strome being slow, but I've seen 10 comments just like Russ's. Everybody's saying he's slow. I've seen him. He's not slow. He'll be better. He's going to be on. I've heard that 10 times, but I've heard nobody say that he's slow.
Right.
So I think one person says it, and then everybody sort of, kind of glams onto that, and then everybody, there's been, everybody's talked about that.
Well, the funny thing is, Kevin, at the top prospects game last January, I heard the same mantra. He's slow. Well, of course he's slow when he's on the same line as Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner's flying around like a little bug. I mean, I thought, Strome was pretty decent, above average skating ability. And if there is a problem with it, then, power skating coaches, he'll be, Tavares was labeled as slow, and now I think he's a pretty good skater. So it can be rectified. So I don't think it's a big problem, even if he is, average. He's got a lot of talent. He's got top-end talent.
All I know is that if I'm the Coyotes, I have to take a guy who's going to create some goals. They've got Ekman Larson, they've got some prospect defensemen that are in the pipeline, but what they don't have is an offense. And Domi's going to be there, but you need more parts to it. And you're up at when you're getting a guy third, that forward should be able to be an impact player, and I think they will be. So. as much as I like Hannafin, I just think sometimes you got to take for a position when you're in that position when it's close. Is Hannafin that much better than? Will he have a greater impact than Strom? It doesn't appear that he would be. So if he wouldn't, then why wouldn't you take for a positional need at that point?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, some of the coaches, you can't take the scout out of them. Like some GMs, rather. Some of the GMs were long gone. Like you never saw him. Ron Hextall never even made it. He had plane trouble, and he never even made it, from what I heard. But you had guys like Don Maloney stayed in the stands the whole time watching these guys. And Jarmo Kekalainen, I got the feeling Jarmo Kekalainen wasn't leaving until Rupe Hintz went out there, and that was at like 5 o'clock. So it's just one of these things where some of these GMs are really wanted to see that last bit of stuff. They did, and that might make a difference for a few of them. Look, if you're picking 1 and 2, it doesn't. But if you're Don Maloney, this could make your franchise. I mean, it could make or break your franchise going forward, especially with a new owner. And so I could tell he's working extremely hard on this to make that right decision. But here's the thing about this draft. It really will be hard, even in the first round, to make a bad decision. Like a guy like Brandon Carlo, I've always been pretty good about him, never too high on him. I was the only one who talked to him. And this guy's played against international competition. He was on the World's team. He's been on any team you could be on as a shutdown D-man. At the end of the day, no one wants to talk to a shutdown D-man except for me, I guess. And I came away with it like, wow, if you're a team like somewhere between 25 and 30, he's probably going to be there. And teams will kill for players like this down the road. And then even the second round, just trying to figure out, I haven't fully figured out my second round, guys like Jeremy Bracco. There are some really talented players that are going to be in that second round. And if you get within the first 10 picks of that second round, they're going to feel like top 15 picks in other drafts. I mean, it's really that good. A guy like Nick Merkley, he makes it to the Memorial Cup. He does everything you could possibly do for a 5'10" player. He scores, I think he had 5 points, 3 goals and 2 assists. He's 5'10". He's strong. He finished great in a couple of the combine events. And yet I still get this feeling that some people aren't sold on him. And I'm thinking, what else does this kid have to do to show you he's tough? He actually got big guys away.
And Russ, I'm wondering, because the draft is so deep, where you can get quality guys who would conceivably be first-round picks in the upper to mid-second round, whether teams like Arizona and teams like Toronto. Toronto doesn't have a second-round pick. If Arizona can find themselves a team who they trade down a couple spots and get an extra second, it might be beneficial for them because a team like Carolina or a team like Columbus might want a Hannafin for their defense, and they would be trading down a couple picks, getting an extra second, and you'd still be getting a guy who's an impact player at 5 or at 7 or wherever in the top 10 in the first round. So I think there's those questions that will be answered probably on the draft floor.
Yeah, I think Columbus might need a defenseman because Ryan Murray's been so dinged up in the early part of his career. It may go the same way like it went for Thomas Hickey for him, and he might not be that kind of impact player. So you make a good point with that. Sorry, Kev.
I'll tell you what would concern me more than combine would be if I'm sitting there at 3 and 4, and my scouting staff says Hannafin is the third best prospect, and then I look at TSN's website, and Craig Button, who's pretty respected, and has been a GM, has been the director of player development, has been a scout for many years, and is a pretty bright guy, as we all know. I look and see that he has Hannafin rated 12. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I would change my rating, but it would raise a flag, and I'd look hard at that.
And he also has Strome lower too on his list as well. So I mean, I think he had Strome 6th or 7th, I believe. So I mean,
I know the reason. I could tell you the reason. Noah Hannafin, when you watch him play, it's sort of like watching a guy like Jay Bouwmeester who does everything extremely well. And you're never going to get up out of your seat the way you would for Erik Karlsson like you do for a guy like Jay Bouwmeester. And Noah Hannafin there's nothing bad about his game. He does things at top speed. He blocks shots. He scores. He's got a great shot. He can handle anybody. He's really smart. If you ever talk to a partner of his, they all say how he makes them a better player. All those things are great, but for the media and for people that are watching him, he's not super sexy to watch. And so I have noticed that he's taken a little bit of a beating the last couple of weeks in some circuits, but I don't think that has anything to do with his play. And his play has always been great. Now, in the World Juniors, if you want to say, hey, he wasn't great, he's pretty young. I mean, let's cut him a little break. And not everybody's going to be a superstar every series. But I don't think his talent has diminished at all. I just think it's the wow factor has diminished a little for him.
He was so smooth, though. I mean, he was so smooth. Even in the World Juniors when he wasn't, even though he wasn't making an impact, he just was such a smooth player. He just looked like
skating the transition. It's like he's like a 20-year NHL guy with that. I mean,
and Russ has made the point a few times. Provorov, I believe was number 1 on Button's list in terms of defensemen, is more pro ready at age 18 than he is, and I believe Werenski was number 2 on his list. And he's got sick talent, and he's physically is going to be a beast. So I mean, I think Hanifin has a chance to still be the number 3 pick. If it's not Arizona, it could be a team that trades up. If not, he could be one of these guys. To use an NFL comparative, he could be one of these Aaron Rodgers guys who slips down 2 or 3 slots until somebody either moves up or picks him in the second half of the top 10.
The scary thing about Werenski, and I don't know if you've even seen this, Kevin. Since I've seen him last, he's already about 212 pounds or so. He still looks like he could put on about 15 pounds of muscle, which is scary considering what package you already have with him and the fact that he was the youngest college player and he's going to be one of the youngest players in the draft. So, there's no question he could possibly leapfrog some of these guys. And Provorov, you probably could put him right on the NHL ice. But some teams like to draft with a guy with a higher ceiling, too, and I think they're going to look at that with Hanifin, too.
There are players within the U.S. program that believe that Werenski will be better than Hanifin. That, he is, just going to be better. Now, that doesn't mean they don't like Hanifin. They just think, that, that's he just had the other guy has the other more upside. So.
It's like the old days. Who do you like? Do you like Chelios or do you like Leach?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good argument. Although I think in that case those 2 players have some of the same abilities. They both are good offensive players and can play defense as well. So it will be interesting to kind of see how that unfolds. I think Button's list would concern me more than the media list. Like I agree with you that the media tend to view things differently and would probably do exactly as you said they would. But Button's a different animal. I don't think he has concerns about how flashy Hanifin is. So I mean it would concern me again. Everybody has their own taste in players and what they want and what they like, but if I'm sitting there at 3 and, it would just say, well, let's take another look at him. So I've seen him, and I think he's an exceptional player play.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Russ, what's interesting? I don't know if you've ever done this. I'm sure you guys have, but if no one has, you guys should get all these people who do these top, drafting things. Like every year, there's all these lists that come out of the first round. And you should retroactive go back 5 years and see who really is picking the best players.
That's done all the time.
We do that all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All you got to do is go on the web. They're everywhere.
Yeah. What's tough about that is, injury. Like some guys you like, and then they get hurt, and then they're not the same guy. And then some guys you legitimately look at him and you say, wow, you know what? I didn't think he had that in him at the NHL level, and I thought he was good, and now he's great. I mean, and sometimes that has to do with player development. Sometimes that has to do with training. Sometimes that has to do with coaching. Sometimes it has to do with all of them. That's why I always look at a team like the Red Wings, and they've had very little movement in like their head scouting and their training, and so their player development has never really been affected for many, many years, probably 20 years, Kev. I mean, it's been a long time. And
Jim Nill took all those guys with him, so.
Okay, so now it's a little more anew.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, when you have some structure in place like that, that is a great edge for any franchise. And again, go look at the Kings.
And that's the way players develop. So that's a really great point. I mean, it's a little hard to do that. One last thing I wanted to do before we get out of here, it's a little silly, but I thought it was pretty funny. A good way to end the show today. Mark Lazarus, who is the NBC Sports chairman, if you guys are familiar with him, he's the guy at the top of NBC Sports. came out actually and said that he's against NHL playoff beards. And this is pretty funny. Like, he basically thinks that these players are blowing an opportunity. You know, these guys who are these young, attractive guys who could get really, you know, a lot of them are modern type guys. He says truly they're one of a kind among professional athletes, and it's a tradition and a superstition, he says, but I think that hurts their recognition. They lose opportunities for endorsements. That guy doesn't look like the kid next door anymore, you know. And I bring this up because, you know, this is obviously a marketing guy looking at an NHL tradition, so it's not a big deal. But I'm very curious about how many NHL players actually like this tradition versus what it's become. You know, no one will ever admit this to you, but I've had a few players say that they hate it. They really do, but they'll never go on the record about it because it's just, you know, it's not cool to hate it. But
I think lost in translation here is the fact that most NHL players don't care about endorsements, and so today they're going to be a good teammate. They're going to do what their teammates want to do, and they want to win the Stanley Cup. They don't care if they're the next, you know, Jose Cuervo guy.
Right, but every once in a while there's players who just won't do it, right? Or players who don't do it.
Yeah, like Rick Nash didn't do it. I mean, he had, you know, he was half shaven most of the time, but again, that's a couple players on a team. It's personal choice, but it doesn't mean they're getting endorsements because they don't. This is just a typical television thing, all about show and what we see. And at the end of the day, he's probably thinking more women would care. And you know what? NBC did the smartest thing they ever did in their life, and it had nothing to do with beards or clean-shaven guys. They decided to go right from the Kentucky Derby, and they were lucky because they got a Triple Crown winner, right into the hockey game with no pregame, and they had their best ratings ever. And that was a smart move. That's a good TV move. Anything else is just stupidity.
Yeah. And they're ignoring the advertising acumen of Norelco and Just for Men because.
What do you think, Kevin? Do you think they think if the players were told they weren't allowed to do this, they would be upset about it?
No, I don't. I mean, I think people like some of the players like the tradition and some don't. It's like anything else, and some guys have trouble growing beards. You know, a guy like, and I brought this up before, but Henrik Zetterberg can decide at 3:30 to grow a beard, and by 4 you know, he's got a full Civil War reenactor beard. And guys like Crosby could grow a beard for 2 years, and it would look like he was. So, and, you know, it's a struggle.
Well, we laugh at that, so that's good that we get to laugh at that too.
No, it's good entertainment, but I just think that the players hate it. I honestly do.
I actually kind of like it. It's you know, kind of the traditions of the game. So I couldn't remember the guy. I just couldn't remember who the Hannafin thing reminds me of, and it's Cam Fowler. That it just occurred to me.
Ah, yeah.
Cam Fowler was highly rated, dropped down to 12. He ended up playing right away in the league. Hannafin could do that.
Yeah.
You know, where he could fall all down and then play in the NHL next season. So. And
you know what the knock on Cam Fowler was? He's not tough enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? He does everything else so great, it doesn't even matter. And I remember, and you'll attest to this, when he was doing the interviewing during the Stanley Cup, like all the prospects do, he came in with a shiner. And I told him, I said, hey, that's perfect. Maybe that'll get people to stop talking about you not being tough enough.
Tough you are. Yeah, you gotta get beaten up before you go. This is a great show, guys. I know that y'all go, but we'll be back again tomorrow before the show, probably around the same time. I'm thinking 4 o'clock Eastern time is a good time. Well, yeah, that's a good time, because if we get on the bus any later than that, we won't make it to the arena. That's how crazy it is around here. Yeah, the list is definitely. I mean, for only being 8 miles away, it takes literally an hour to get there. So. At rush hour.
I actually want to always run up the aisle to the bus and tell the guy, you know, I've driven this thing 100 times and none of them go to the right way. You know.
You gotta tell them this because I think they would maybe they would appreciate this because they really.
Well, I went on
oh my gosh.
The other day that went the right way and it took us 12 minutes. You know, which you know, because you just go right up Grand. I mean, I drive it all the time. You know, I park my car and drive and.
Right.
You just but we've never gone the same way twice, you know.
No, we don't. We never do.
No.
And there's times when you're on a street and you're just sitting and you're.
Make sure they leave a mint on your pillow. That's more important.
So.
Yeah. Sometimes you're driving on the street. You're going down to the next corner. You're like thinking any normal person in their right mind would turn off the street now. They would find any other way to go, any possible. And you get to the corner and you go past the corner and you're like, when you finally. We finally did turn right last night. There was a cheer from the prospects in the back. Hey, we're getting off the street. And the last final thing about the prospects, it was really I walked from the to the hotel elevator. They were all waiting in the elevator and pressed the button, and one of them basically said, all right, let's take bets which elevator's coming. I mean, this is like these guys just can't not compete on anything.
Competitive, yeah.
There you go. All right, guys. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Enjoy your night without hockey. We'll be back tomorrow.